Welcome back, everyone, to hour number two of Back Your Play with Q. I'm your host, as always, Rich Quinones, brought to you by Play It Again Sports, 1450 Clements Bridge Road in Deptford, New Jersey, buying used sports equipment and more, and also fresh roasted coffee. You guys know I love to have my coffee on the air. If you check out the promo code BYP or BYP20, you'll get 20% off your first purchase, fresh roasted coffee. Boom, boom, boom. We always love to talk a little baseball with our good friend Steve Gardner. Does a great job with USA Today, covers the sport, also baseball writer, reporter, senior fantasy editor, and a vote in the Hall of Fame. So, my friend, I always appreciate a couple moments. The season just picks up rapidly, but have to start, obviously, with the passing of the great Say Hey Kid, Willie Mays. And I want to get your first, listen, he was in his 90s. He lived a wonderful, wonderful life. But the first words to describe Willie Mays that come to your mind?
Legendary, athletic, um, ultra talented, and gracious
Mm,
also. There so many of the stories that you hear about Willie Mays talk about his exploits on the field, and the great catch
yep.
off Vic Wertz's ball in the World Series in '54. But other things, I think, even to people that you talk about that knew him and that interacted with him, have wonderful stories about the man himself and how gracious and such a gentleman that he was. That if you can imagine someone who is a greater player, greater
Mm.
person off the field than on the field, that is kind of the sense of Willie Mays too. So it's just a blessing that this world got to have Willie Mays in it for all of the 93 years that he was on the planet.
Yeah, you mentioned that, the catch, right? The over the shoulder, the basket. I mean, just basically invented the basket catch, so to speak.
Mhm.
But 54, it's crazy to think. Pennant 51, 54, 62, 73 with the Mets when he finished his career, the final two, which were forgettable. We know that. But in his prime, an all-time great legendary player. That was his only World Series win. And I believe they swept Cleveland that year. But I look, I obviously I wasn't even around. I mean, I had to go by what my father used to tell me about Willie Mays, and my father growing up, he was a Brooklyn Dodgers fan. Duke Snyder was his guy,
Mhm.
right? And then you've got the New York Giants, and then both those teams respectively go out west. They become rivals, so some fans gravitated towards either the Mets or Yankees. He kept an eye on the Dodgers, but gravitated more to the Yankees. But would always, that debate, man on Mays, he would, anytime we watched highlights, he would always turn around and be like, son, that's nothing. Meaning, like, you have no idea just how great. I mean, when we talk five, look, we knew Mickey Mantle can run, catch, throw, right?
Mhm.
Willie Mays, to me, 5'10", a buck 70. He had a ridiculous power. He got on base. He stole bases. He played a ridiculous outfit. I think for the younger generation, or those like myself that weren't able to watch him play live and can only go by highlights, you have to go to, I guess, the older school, the older head, so to speak. And in this case, I deferred always to my father, and he said he was just a phenomenal player, but always at it, played the game the way it was meant to be played.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was nothing he couldn't do. I
Right.
mean, you think of all the skills that you want to list in a good baseball player, in a superior baseball player, a superstar baseball player, hit for power,
Yep.
hit for average.
Yep.
He checks all those boxes: play defense, run the bases, throw. All of those things Willie Mays was excellent at, and among the best ever. And I think if you look at the stats from after he came back from the wars and losing 2 seasons of his prime
Prime.
to the
That's
war
right.
effort. After that, you know he won what, 2 MVPs, I think. But yet, and I know you don't like war, but war measuring the value of defense and base running in addition to
Yes.
offense,
Yes.
I think he led the National League in war like 10 times. So
Right.
he could have been a 10-time MVP. I mean, he had a case for each of those years that he didn't win the MVP award. So that just shows you what a great all-around player he was. And if he didn't play his home games or many of his home games in Candlestick Park,
Yep. Yep.
he could have had 700 home runs instead of 660. And then,
Yes.
what else, could we have done to elevate his image and his standing in Major League Baseball history? You could say, obviously, I think to a man, you would say that he was the greatest living baseball player
Fair enough.
until his death. You could make the case he was the greatest baseball player, period, that has ever lived. There is a strong case for Willie Mays being that, and I mean, you can't say much more than that about a person.
No, 100%. And you're right. I mean, when people sit there and they'll go Mantle, Mays, Ruth, Wagner, Cobb, Aaron, the list goes on and on and on. And you mentioned the MVPs. I pulled up his numbers, and I like how you snuck in the war
Yeah,
little
thank you.
shot right there. But I love looking at the stats and the numbers and compiling. And you go back, you could have made a strong case that he should have won the MVP in 62. But Maury Wills obviously had, I think, over 100 stolen bases. How you
Right.
not giving it to him at that time? But always in the conversation of MVP, top three, four, five. And listen, it was sad to see, when not getting under fly balls in the playoffs and the World Series. And listen, that's guys that play for 20, 22, 24 years and they're an all-star 22, 23 years. You get old, man. It happens sometimes. Mickey Mantle with the bad knee. Sometimes you can't get around the bases. Sometimes you miss judge fly balls. But I I would make a case that he would be top three. I just think from a generational standpoint, what he meant to the game, how he transcended the game. And as you alluded to, if you take away those years that he missed, right? He had 660 home runs. He could have easily had over 700 home runs. The average was there, the hits were there. I don't believe. I think in football we look at guys, especially quarterbacks, and say, well, they never won a Super Bowl. I think in baseball it's a little different. I mean, are we going to penalize Ernie Banks because he never won? Of course not, right? But he was an all-time great. So I would kind of side with you. I mean, I, the older generation will always compare Mantle to Mays, Mays to Mantle, and can't they both be great?
Yeah, exactly. And there's no reason you can't. You have to choose one or
Right.
the other. And Mickey Mantle hit for power the way nobody did, back in his day. Willie Mays would hit home runs, but Mickey Mantle's legendary length, prodigious home runs
Right.
was something completely different. So there's you can draw lines and make comparisons, but the bottom line is both were great, and Willie Mays just was able to play for a lot longer,
Yes.
and as a result, his final numbers look so much better than almost anybody who's played the game.
Yeah, yeah, and coincidentally enough, the Giants and the Cardinals tonight, right? 3 game set.
Mhm.
Rick Woodfield in Birmingham, Alabama. So May started his career obviously with the Barons for a couple of seasons before getting the call up to the majors. And yeah, who would you say is the closest player over the last 25, 30 years that you can compare? I have a feeling I know who you're going to say, but I'm going to ask anyway. Compare Willie Mays to.
Oh dear. That's That's a great question, Rich. Tell me who I'm thinking of, so
I
we don't
I
have dead
thought
air
maybe
for
you
a long
I thought
time
maybe
here.
you were thinking of Griffey.
That makes a lot of sense, and Griffey being left-handed, but other than that, yeah, the defense,
There you go. The
the
power.
power, base running,
Yep.
the charisma
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
that's
I
that's a
mean, one
that's
was
an
to say,
excellent
"Hey, kid," and the
comparison.
other was the kid. So there you go. Right. So
Sure. There you go. Yeah. That was where I was going.
yeah,
That
yeah.
makes a whole lot of sense.
Um,
So thank you for saving me,
no, no,
giving me
no
the
worries.
safety net.
Steve Gardner, great writer from USA Today, kind enough to join us, a voter as well in the Hall of Fame. Rich Quinones here, BYP with Q. I'm looking right now, and I know the baseball season is a war of attrition. I know it's a very long season, and I know we focus on the Phillies, the Mets, the Yankees, and I look at the Yankees. I still have some question marks. I know they're 51 and 25. You know, they got issues with the catcher spot. DJ looks like he's shot. You know, they got the scare with Judge. Okay, fine. But I don't believe that Baltimore's going away in that division. I really don't, and I'm not going to get, caught up on the fact that whether they take 2 out of 3, whether they sweep what Baltimore is a really good team. They have a very good lineup from top to bottom. I know that's your squad, Dios, but I just have a sneaky suspicion that come trade deadline, yeah, there we go. Come trade deadline, um, I believe Baltimore, if Baltimore was going to be a buyer, what would be their biggest need right now at the deadline?
Well, I think since the Kyle Bradish injury, the fact that he's not coming back and is going to have Tommy John surgery, I think a starting pitcher is probably one of the items on the wish
Yeah.
list for them for sure, because they've been getting great performances so far from Cole Irvin and Albert Suarez at the back of the rotation. You can't necessarily count on that
Mhm.
all the way through the season. Grayson Rodriguez has been up and down. So, where do you turn to have that second guy maybe
Right.
behind Corbin Burns that you can rely on, that you're going to throw out there in a 5-game series or something, and you need that number two. So it would not surprise me to see Baltimore go out and look for somebody, along the lines of a Garrett Crochet or a Jesus Luzardo or whomever, somebody that they can feel reasonably confident in. And maybe they can't be reasonably confident in Crochet because of the innings, or Luzardo because of his health history, stuff like that. But it seems like that would be the starting point if you're putting together a wish list and you're the Baltimore Orioles.
Who's got more staying power? I mean, I think Baltimore and the Yankees are your top 2 teams. You look at Cleveland, you look at Seattle. I can't discount Minnesota, but I look at their divisions and I'm like, all right, Boston's Tampa Bay's having a down year, Toronto's having a down year. It seems to
Hmm.
be a 1-2 race in the AL East between Baltimore and the Yankees. But staying power out of the Central, Cleveland, Minnesota, staying power out of the West. I mean, you look at Seattle, I think they're 9, 10 games up already over the Houston Astros. The Texas Rangers have fallen back. We know how bad the Angels are. So Cleveland, Minnesota, Seattle, who's got more staying power?
I think Seattle. I mean, talking about starting pitching
Pitching.
again,
Yeah.
from the beginning of the season, they stood out to me
Mhm.
as maybe the best rotation 1 to 5 of any team in the majors. And I think we talked early in the
We
season,
did.
about preseason predictions. Seattle was my
Yep.
pick to go to the World Series,
Yep. Yep.
and so I'm gonna not do a half victory lap, because we're not even close to the midway point yet. But they've looked good, and Julio Rodriguez has not really kicked it in. He's a second half guy. For the first few years of his career, he's turned it on after the All Star break. So good things possibly coming from
Yep.
him. And yeah, I like the Seattle team, and I like the pitching. Maybe I'm a little bit biased toward teams with good rotations and solid bullpens, but
You have
I
to.
like
It's
what
how
they
you win.
have.
That's how
Hmm.
you win. Yeah, team ERA around 3.58. Then you look at the NL. It is because I see them on a nightly basis. I don't think people really understand just how good of a start the Phillies, historic start.
Hmm.
When I feel as though it's like if you really haven't paid attention to baseball, you kind of look up and you're like, wait a second. This team's on pace to win well over 90 plus, maybe even 100 games right now. And I know we kind of had this conversation before. Listen, Atlanta, unfortunately, with the injuries, they've kind of woken up, winning 3 straight, but Washington's not going to be a contender. I don't care how many times Grimace is around for the Mets. They're not going to be a contender, right? Even though they lost the other night. And then Miami's a
Time to bring out
bad.
the Hamburglar
Yeah,
for first
exactly,
pitch
right,
now, right?
exactly. But the Phillies, to me, I just think they're clearly the best team in the NL. Now, I would love to see them in a 7-game series, say against the Dodgers. But I think I might have asked you this again, trade deadline. If you're the Philadelphia Phillies, what's your greatest need right now?
Ooh. Um, maybe beef
Uh,
up the bullpen.
okay.
And that's kind of what you say all the time.
Yeah.
It seems like when the Phillies have been involved in postseason chases, you know, you can't have too much pitching at the back of the bullpen, and they don't really have a go-to closer. Not that they may find one necessarily on the trade market this
Hmm.
trade deadline, but just to get more depth back there. So if Alvarado stumbles, which he's done some
Sure.
and has not been super consistent, or Jeff Hoffman needs a day off or whatever. They've been good, but to give them some support and backup, I think would help Philadelphia, would help them tremendously. And what do you do too defensively in center field if Johan
That's what I was going
Rojas
to
is
ask
sent
you.
down to the minors?
Yep. That's what I
That's
was going to ask you.
probably an area of concern as well.
Yeah. Yep. Nope. Agree 100% with that. Give me a player, give me a team that I think before the season started, we thought maybe would be in contention, but now we're looking at them and you say to yourself, hey, man, I'll do a column on this team prior to deadline because they're going to be sellers. They're not going to be buyers.
Yeah. I wonder. I wonder what's going on in San Diego. That's they have
An
enough
abundance of
talent to
talent.
be able to compete, but it seems like they always underachieve. And now even after the departure of Juan Soto and Josh
Hmm.
Hader, it looked like they still had some staying power to some degree. But it just seems like they're not able to put anything together and be consistent to
Who would they move?
where,
Who would they move?
gosh, I, the thing is, they traded away Drew Thorpe when they had Drew Thorpe to get Dylan Cease. So they've traded a lot of their farm system to be able to bring guys in. In terms of even in previous years with Soto and everybody else. So I don't know that their farm system can support additions, the kind that you would think would be an impact kind of player. It's really hard. That they love to trade,
Right.
certainly. AJ Preller is good at that, but I don't see he's going to have to pull a rabbit out of his hat.
Yeah.
To tell you the truth.
Yeah, it's just amazing. There's a disconnect. There's when you look at if you pull up the box score on a nightly basis or you watch the games on the West Coast, you see that they have talent in the lineup. They've got home run hitters. They got guys that can
Hmm.
get on base. I think sometimes you do have to learn how to manufacture runs. You got to scratch and claw. I'm looking at a lot of these teams right now, and I feel as though they rely too much on the home run ball, or when they get on base, they're not taking enough chances. They're not. I feel as though stolen bases are kind of down. I know there are a couple teams that have been exceptional this year, but I think kind of
Mm.
across the board. I mean, you know me, I'm more of a hey man, if you got to play small ball, you got to manufacture runs. You have to figure out a way to get on base, and you have to figure out a way, how to move guys over, and you got to take some chances. That's just me. I do want to, and if you wanted to comment on that, go ahead.
No, I was going to elaborate on your point too, that this year home runs and scoring have been down,
Hmm.
and you can't, or teams have not been as successful relying on the home run to provide the offense. So they're going to have to steal more bases. They're
Yep.
going to have to play the small ball, and stolen bases continue to go up. The rule changes have helped, but now you're still seeing teams. Maybe the calculus has changed to where getting an extra base now is more of a positive move than it's been in the past, when you could hit a 3-run home run and come back into a game. It's a lot more now, it seems, at least in the first part of the season, and maybe when the summer comes, maybe we see runs
Right.
and home
Warmer
runs and
weather.
everything else increase dramatically. But to this point in the season, and we've had enough data to say we have a trend here. Run scoring is down, home runs are down, pitching is much more successful, and you've got to rely on taking the extra base and getting yourself in position to score, maybe without the benefit of a hit, more than you
Yeah.
have in the past.
Hence the, when you look at some of these team batting averages, like on a
Right.
a good year, on average, covering the sport as long as you've been covering it and being a fan of the sport, what would you say is a solid team batting average?
Ooh, I mean, it does change with the run environment and the offensive landscape. Right now, I will say somewhere in probably 250
That's what I was
is
going to add.
probably
250, 250
acceptable.
plus.
Yeah.
But we're not seeing
Um,
that. It's like 226, 230, 238.
yeah.
I mean,
There are
some
a
of these
lot of
teams,
teams that are way down there.
horrible, horrible. The ghost runner is the worst thing to happen to baseball, to modern baseball. And I'm sorry, just me. Get rid of it. Take it away.
I don't like it either. I don't like it either. It bugs the stats guy in me because you know everything has to add up,
Uh,
and somehow or another, how did this guy get on second? Those are lost bases somewhere that appear out of nowhere. I don't
yes.
like that at all. And plus, again, the gameplay, it changes the game
Yeah.
to where it's not the same
Yep.
as the game is in the first 9 innings,
Yeah.
and it inflates. Here's the thing too: if Major League Baseball wants to say, we're making all these rules to get offense back into the game, and we're doing everything we can to make things more exciting for fans, those are artificially inflated totals. If you look at the runs scored in the first 9 innings of games versus the difference of runs scored in extra inning games,
Hmm.
that is a huge chunk of just additional runs that are kind of cheap found money kind of things that weren't earned. So the stats may belie what's actually happening in the game, and that's that offense is down, it's not up.
Right. And that's the purest in me where I don't care if it's 10 innings, 15, 23 innings. The beauty of the sport is 27 outs. That's it.
Hmm.
Yeah, I can't. I'm like, oh my God, this is just. I mean, we just saw it in the Yankees series. I think it was against the Red Sox. I'm like, come on, man. I'm like, this is just so.
Well, and
Anyway,
you need to have pitchers, relief pitchers, who aren't just 1 inning
that's right.
guys. If you're going to have a 13 inning game or a 14 inning game, it forces you to have
That's right.
pitchers on your roster who can, in an emergency, throw 3 innings or 4 innings or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that is a type of player that is pretty close to evaporated in today's game.
Yes. And that's where the managers actually get paid to manage too, when you start to creep into the
Right.
postseason in those situations as well. Of course, Steve Gardner, kind enough to join us. Give him a follow on X at Steve A. Gardner. Read the great content he writes for USA Today, baseball writer, reporter, and a little retro spec, a flashback, if you will, some good thoughts on the passing of Willie Mays, and of course the current state of baseball, which I don't know. It's just I think there's just sports that are just meant to be played at a certain pace, and
Hmm.
baseball is one of them.
Yeah, I will say though, I don't disagree with the pitch clock.
I'm okay with that. Speed it up a
And
little.
yeah, getting players, the
Right,
batters in the batter's box and ready for the pitcher to
right.
pitch. That there was a lot of dead time. The Mike Hargroves, the human rain
Rain
delays
delays.
of the
Pete
world,
Traskell. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
those
Yeah.
guys that make the game stretch out. Give me a Mark Burley pitched game
In, out.
uh,
Yeah.
all the time, man.
Yeah. No,
So
I remember when I was writing for and it's now doesn't even exist, a sports network, maybe 15, 20 something odd years ago. I remember, man, you get these games 2 hours and 15 minutes. You're like, "Phew," but anytime the Yankees played, it was a 3+ hour game. And I'm like, oh,
oh gee,
I gotta wait for the beat guy to call up and give me quotes. And I was like, I don't care what Tori said tonight. Just let me get the wrap up. Let me get it out. And,
exactly. You
oh
knew when the
man,
Yankees and Red Sox played,
uh,
you better settle in,
5 hours.
have your snacks and your beverages and
Yeah.
everything,
Yeah.
because you're gonna have a slog, and
Yes.
generally you
Abs-
got it.
Absolutely with that. So Steve's going to join us again weekly throughout the baseball season. I always greatly appreciate a couple moments for your time. Thanks for jumping on today.
You bet, Rich. Always a pleasure.